Well, hi, this is Betty with Beyond the Dalet. I've been meditating on a few things recently, and I want to talk about all of it today. Um, so, just to let you know, I'm going to be all over the place today, but not without not without reason, not without purpose. Um, okay, so first of all, I want to touch on the coming year, 5786. So I want to get that out of the way up front. So for those of you who don't want to hang around for the whole mess, we'll get you in and out quick here, hopefully. So I put um a PDF online um last week. I finished it for 5786, and I want to sum this up, okay, in what I'm getting prophetically for this coming year. I believe 5786 is going to be a time of abundant fruitfulness. That and how I see this affecting um, people is in areas where you've been fruitful in the past. There's going to be like this is going to be a bumper crop year. It reminds me of of acorns, and that might sound completely disconnected, but bear with me here. When I was living in Central Virginia, we had on the property we had a lot of trees, and there were oak trees in the back. Um, and forgive me, I don't remember which kind, but certain trees they produce acorns. Some of them produce every year. Some of them will produce like every 3 years. And and typically there will be like 1 year, and it's always like 3 years or every 7 years, something like that, where there will be a bumper crop. And it's pretty consistent with, okay, every 7 years you have this bumper crop of acorns. And I remember standing in the back of the yard, and it was somewhat reminiscent of the apple trees from the Wizard of Oz, where you felt like you were being pelted with acorns. Like the trees are actually throwing them at you because it felt like they were being hurled off, not like they're just like we're just nicely dropping. Um, but because we were in the woods, what that really meant was that there's going to be food in abundance, and um, and the wildlife knows. Okay, so we had a lot of deer in that area, and there were times when during the course of a day we might see anywhere from 3 to 7 deer just passing through, over the course of the day. And the moms would come and bring their babies, and they'd sit and they'd bask in the sunshine and all that, and it was a beautiful sight. But one year when I was there was one of these bumper crop years. And I'm telling you, the deer came from everywhere. I think there was one day there must have been close to 20 of them in the backyard. At one time, there were 3 bucks, which you don't always see. You see the does, you see the babies, but you almost never saw, like, it took a lot for the bucks to actually come out, especially during the daytime. But they would come and hang out and feed, and it was like they knew this is where it's at. You know, I mean, just instinctively, they came to where the food was. And I've been pondering on that as I've been thinking about what this abundant fruitfulness means, because fruit is food. There's going to be, it's almost like I want to say, God is saying there's going to be food in the house again. Like you can almost smell the fresh bread. When you start getting into we're in September now, um, and here in the, I mean, we're not far north, but I'm in the Chicago area now, And I'm sitting outside with my fleece on this morning because it's like 45 degrees. It's fall, you know. This is when the oven starts to go on and you start to bake breads and I love this time of year because I can make my, baked acorn squash and things like that I wait all year for. I wait for the harvest of the year so I can enjoy it. And I love this time of year for that. And and I want to say anyone who's grown zucchini knows what it's like to have a lot of produce come from it's almost like you're finding places to go with all this zucchini because there's just so much of it. Um, I remember, a few years back was like one of my roommates was growing zucchini and it was just everywhere. There was just an abundance of this and you had to get out there quickly to because the crop is coming in and you couldn't let it sit out there for too long. You wanted to get it when it was ripe and ready and all that. And you had to stay on top of the harvest. So when you have abundant fruitfulness, you also have a need to be watchful. You also have a need to be ready to take action. Okay, because abundant fruitfulness equates to harvest. That means this is a harvesting season. So, there are, what does it say in Ecclesiastes? There's a time to sow seed and there's a time to gather. This is not a planting season. This is a reaping season. So, this is a time where we're going to be taking in the harvest from the prior season. The seeds were already sown for this. This is a time where there's not only going to be a time of harvest, but it's going to be a bumper crop harvest. Kind of like when when um when Joseph in Egypt was telling the Pharaoh the interpretation of his dream. Okay. Um, it's you're going to have 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of want. It says so the wisdom is during those 7 years, what does it mean to have 7 years of plenty? It meant there was going to be consistently for 7 years, there was going to be this bumper crop every single year. And that's unheard of. Okay. That's supernatural. That's that's above and beyond what normally would happen. And I'm not predicting that that's what's going to happen. I'm talking about abundance and how abundance works. And so I'm just simply trying to convey the picture. This is going to be a time of plenty. It's going to be a time when there's going to be more than enough coming in. Where, and I believe we've been in a season of diminishing. Especially over the last 3 to 4 years have been, excuse me, they've been god awful. Okay, um, and I'm not going to mince words. It sucked. Okay, um, the diminishing that has taken place in many ways has tried to separate us. There's been a lot of sifting, and and like I said, I'm kind of all over the place today. I apologize for that, but a lot of it is because I'm so full of what I know the Lord is saying that it's taking a lot of restraint for me right now to try to keep myself together to convey this because there's such an excitement within me. Um, and I'm excited that there's an excitement because I haven't had that in a while. Um, the last 4 years or so, um, minimally, have been a time of great trial. It's also been a time of being sifted. Well, here's what happens when you're being sifted. Okay, if you've ever sifted anything, okay, you know that that's a time of separation, okay? Well, when we're being sifted and separated, and stuff is being separated from us, things are being sifted out. What remains? What stays? I got to tell you, the verse that keeps going through my mind is from 1 Corinthians 13, and I forget exactly which verse it is, but it's the end of 1 Corinthians 13, where it says, "These three remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love." And the prior verses to that are where it says, if there are tongues, they'll cease. If there's prophecies, they'll end. That whole thing. And I'm not going to go down that path right now. That's not I could easily get distracted with 1 Corinthians 13. So I really want to stay on target here. These three remained: faith, hope, and love. And I remember I was sitting with the Lord, and this was just within the last couple of weeks. And I just said, "God, I'm having a hard time with this verse," because I was in a rough place. And I just said, there are times when I know I could say, I have no hope. I have no hope. And so I'm having a hard time with this verse that says these three remain, these three stay. They're there, they endure. And I'm like, there's times when I feel like my faith has failed. And in the midst of that challenge, and again, I'm just being honest with you with my private time with God. And I wasn't expecting the Lord to speak to me. But in the midst of that, the Lord just began to just ooze into my spirit. And he said, "Betty, um, what is one of the things that separates humanity? What is the final separation?" I said, "Well, that's death." And he goes, "Yeah. And I've had a number of people who I love dearly who have who've died, And he said, "What are you left with?" And he goes, "All the pain and all the abuse or whatever, all the mistreatment and the misunderstandings and even resentments and unforgiveness, things like that." He goes, "Is any of that still there for you?" And I'm like, "Well, no, not really." "Why?" "Well, they're not, because they're not here anymore. I mean, I'm grateful that with those people, I was able to, where there were challenges and difficulties in the relationship, I had an opportunity to make, not to, I can't say to make things right, but to heal the relationship. And I was able to, thankfully able to do that with most of those. He goes, "But what are you left with? What's there now?" And I said, "Well, love, you know." I mean, my dad was a very, very, very difficult man, and um, and he's been gone since 2020, and I can honestly say, the only thing that's still there after all this time, because you go through stuff, we all have stuff, and I'm not gonna again not gonna get distracted with that. We all have stuff, but what am I left with now? It's like, well, at the end of the day, there was love between my dad and I. My dad did the best he could, and I'm not honoring the abuse that my dad did or minimizing it in any way. What I'm saying is, for me, at the end of the day, the Lord has healed my soul. I mean, I've gone through a lot of inner healing and letting go of unforgiveness and resentments and all of those things, and really what you're left with, the thing that's still there, is the love. And And he goes, "That's right, because the greatest of these is love." He goes, "There's times when you feel like your faith has failed you." And then he takes me back to what Jesus said to Peter. He said, "Peter, that Satan is, the devil is requested to sift you like wheat, but be of good courage, because I've prayed for you that your faith would not fail you. And when you've been strengthened again, go and strengthen your brothers." And And I've pondered on that over the years because this has been a time of sifting. This has been a time of truly being sifted. And I don't know about you, but again, I looked at that verse and at times had a really hard time with, but his faith did fail. And this is, but only from a certain perspective. He's like, his faith never failed. But the other things that were attached to his faith failed. And I'm like, I never could get that. I just couldn't, there was just, I don't know, just maybe it's me and I'm just that slow. Um, but after having gone through this, there were times when I felt like my faith was all but gone, you know. Um, and there were times when I even questioned whether I still had faith or not. I'm like, I think my faith is just gone. And the Lord just said something to me that I don't know. It's still unraveling within me, okay? But he said, Betty, where my word says, it uses the phrase, a prisoner of hope. And he said, I made you a prisoner. I took you captive by hope. I took you captive by faith, okay? I took you captive. Your faith could not fail because I don't fail. Your faith might fail, but my faith never fails. Your hope may have failed, but my hope has remained. He goes, so faith, hope, and love, it's not about you. It's not about your ability to hold on to faith. It's about your ability to remain in my love, to just sit, just to let me love you. No matter what your circumstances are, no matter how shaken you are. But there were things that needed to be separated out from your being, from your spiritual life even. So during this time of being sifted, um, there were times, and it came up in a conversation I actually had with my sister yesterday, and I just said, I feel like I've, like if I could describe the attempt of the enemy in the midst of the difficulties and all of that, the difficulties of this sifting season, is that that the enemy's effort was to try to separate me from God's love. I said, but Romans 8:38 says, "For I'm convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels nor principalities, nor things present nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord." There's nothing that can separate us from his love. So, having been through this time of great sifting, there's a lot of things that have been sifted out, which was very much needed. But as I said at the beginning of this, we're going into a time of abundant fruitfulness. Um, and one of the reasons we're going to be going into this abundant fruitfulness is because we've been through this sifting. We've been through this time where in the midst of the sifting, it's not that we've been so faithful. It's that God has been so faithful to us as we've gone through it. And as we shift from the time of diminishing into a time of abundant fruitfulness, we need to know that, this is also going to be a time of getting stretched. It's going to put demands on us in a way that that the demand hasn't been there over these last, three or 4 years. So it's, and when I talk about the demand, let me put this into a little bit of a perspective. In one way, it's like, how during COVID everything is shut down and and a lot of people are working from home, and you can sit at your desk or whatever at home and be on your laptop, and from the waist down you're in your jammies and you got your fuzzy slippers on, and I do I have pants on or do I not have pants on? That's the question. Okay. It's everything got so relaxed. It's almost as if we were all in retirement, okay? And I was thinking about this morning actually as I was getting dressed, and I'm like, I honestly am the jeans and t-shirt lady. I mean, I live in jeans and t-shirts. If it's not jeans, it's my yoga pants, okay? Um, so yeah, um, I live in comfort. Well, I'm 66 years old. I've been retired for a while. I'm used to it and I like it. And I don't have anything going on in my life that demands me to have to dress like I'm going into the office anymore. I haven't had that for a very long time. And but recently, and I will share this. Recently, the Lord has been leading me that I'm going to be shifting um, kind of the platform a little bit with how I'm presenting things and whatnot, and we're very very likely going to be doing some video teachings and things like that. Well, that puts a demand on me. That stretches me, and I got to tell you, it stretches me a lot because I'm like, well, I'm very comfortable with doing these recordings in my backyard. You know, um, I'm I'm dressed. Okay, I promise I'm dressed. But there's times when I've done this, I'm like, and I'm sitting here with my morning coffee, and I'm not all that together. Okay, so if I have to do video, it's going to demand more from me. It's gonna it means I have to put more effort in. Well, that's what happens when you're going into a harvest season, when you're going into a time where you've got to do some work now. That's the difference. So as we're shifting into this time of fruitful abundance, we do have to understand that it is time to get our hands back to work in a sense. So it's like for those that are being called to come back into the office, it's like there's some people with COVID, they've been working from home. Even now, this is 2025, there's a lot of people that are still, well, we've been working from home ever since. There's some companies that called people to come back in the office at least one day a week. And it's like, wow, that's just such an inconvenience now. And and I have a friend um, she was sharing with me recently that it was like, well, the really the CEO of the organization is saying we really want people back in the office full time. I mean, that's let's get back to reality here, and we want this. And it's like, but there's some departments they actually work better from home. So there's so I'm not saying everybody's getting called back into the office. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, it's like that. That's the picture. It's like, well, now I got to get dressed and I got to get up. I got to go back to getting up an hour and a half before I have to walk out the door. I have to make the commute again. I have to make that effort. I have to put that, where I've been able to save on my commute cost. I'm walking from my bedroom to the dining room to do my work, you know. Now I have to get up and drive back in again. So there are things that just in a very pragmatic, practical way, things are going to be demanded of us in this coming season that weren't demanded of us before, or I should say, in the prior season. And you know what, I think what I'm going to do is just kind of cut this short today. So I mean, we're already almost a half an hour into this. So I just want to say, I believe again, we're going into a time of fruitful abundance. This is a time that is identified by the pomegranate. Let's say that's the picture of fruitful abundance. as we shift from where we've been to where we're going, I just pray that each one of us will be willing to step up and do what we need to do in this coming season that we didn't have the wherewithal. See, that's what the fear right now is is that I haven't had the wherewithal to do that. And thank God I didn't have to, you know. But now something's going to be demanded of me that in this most immediate season behind us, I didn't have the wherewithal to do. But the Lord is saying the wherewithal is going to be there. He's not going to put on us. He's not going to give us something that he's not also going to give us the ability to step into. And that's where our trust in the Lord comes in. That's where we have to trust and have faith in God that he's going to do what he said he's going to do because he's the one who's going to do it. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. This has been Betty with Beyond the Dalet. Shalom.